Hey everyone, and welcome to a deep dive exploring dystopian worlds. You specifically requested this one, so we're going to be focusing on some novels I know you've already read: 1984, The Handmaid's Tale, and Fahrenheit 451.
Great choices.
We're going to analyze how the authors of those books created such chilling societies that still feel so relevant today.
Yeah.
For this deep dive, we'll be looking at the shared themes, then taking a closer look at 1984 and its real-world implications, and then we'll compare Orwell's vision with Huxley's Brave New World.
Sounds good.
By the end, you'll have a whole new perspective on dystopian literature and maybe even look at our own society a little differently.
What's so interesting about these books is that they're not just warnings.
Right.
They're really insightful critiques of power structures and societal trends
Yeah.
that were already emerging when those books were written and are even more pronounced now.
Absolutely. So let's get started by talking about the core themes that connect those three books: 1984, The Handmaid's Tale, and Fahrenheit 451. You've probably already picked up on some of them just from reading the books: authoritarianism, loss of freedom, dehumanization.
Absolutely. And those themes aren't just abstract ideas. They're really brought to life through some very vivid and often disturbing examples.
Yeah.
Take 1984, for instance. Big Brother's constant surveillance through those telescreens is not just about monitoring people's action.
It's about controlling their thoughts.
It is.
It's so relevant today. We might not have telescreens, but we have algorithms that track our online activity and target us with ads for things we didn't even know we wanted.
It really makes you wonder, are we in control of our own thoughts, or are we being influenced by things we don't even see?
It's a great question, and one I don't know if we have the answer to.
Especially when you think about how these algorithms create echo chambers, where we just see things that reinforce our existing beliefs and don't have exposure to different perspectives.
So we've got surveillance and thought control. What about the loss of freedom? How does that play out in these novels?
Well, each novel presents a different facet of that loss of freedom.
Okay.
In 1984, freedom is restricted through overt force and intimidation. The thought police are always watching,
Yeah.
always ready to punish any deviation from the party line.
But in The Handmaid's Tale, it's the systematic dismantling of women's rights,
Right.
reducing them to basically vessels for reproduction.
Yeah.
It's terrifying the way Gilead controls women's bodies, and they use ritualized rape and call it ceremony.
And then in Fahrenheit 451, freedom is lost through the suppression of knowledge and critical thinking. Burning books is such a powerful image
Yeah.
for how those in power can control the narrative and limit how people understand the world.
It's like they're saying, if we control what you know, we control you.
Exactly. And that control isn't always about physical force. It can be achieved through manipulation or distraction, or even the promise of pleasure.
That's a great point, and something we'll discuss more when we talk about Brave New World. But first, let's unpack 1984 a bit more. I know you said you've read it, but this book has so many layers. Plus, it feels like every day there's a new headline that makes it feel more and more relevant.
It's incredible how Orwell, writing in 1948, managed to capture the essence of so many anxieties we have now.
Yeah.
His understanding of totalitarianism, propaganda, and how seductive fear can be, it feels really prescient.
Let's start with the surveillance in 1984. You mentioned the telescreens, but it goes beyond just watching people, right?
Right.
It's that constant paranoia. You never know who to trust or what might get you in trouble.
Yeah, and the telescreens are just one tool in the party's arsenal. They also use informants. They manipulate language to control thought. They rewrite history to suit their needs.
The Ministry of Truth. Such a chilling concept.
Yeah.
They literally create alternative facts and erase anything that contradicts the party.
Uh-huh.
It's not that far off from what we see now with misinformation and discrediting the news.
Yeah, and it's not just about controlling information. It's about controlling how people see reality.
If you can make people doubt their own memories, you can make them believe anything.
Exactly.
So how does Orwell connect this surveillance and thought control to the individual,
Well, that's where Winston Smith comes in.
the main character?
Yes, he's this ordinary man struggling to hold on to his sanity and individuality in this world where every thought is scrutinized and every move is watched.
You really feel for him, especially when he starts that affair with Julia and tries to rebel against the party.
Right.
You know it's not going to end well, but you can't help but root for him.
And that's what makes his downfall so tragic. The party doesn't just want to control his actions. They want to break his spirit.
To force him to love Big Brother.
Yes.
That's the real horror of the book. It's not just the physical oppression, it's the psychological manipulation. It's stripping people of their humanity and turning them into
Obedient automatons.
Yeah.
And that manipulation is often very subtle. It creeps in through language, culture, even the very structure of society. One of the most chilling parts of the book is newspeak.
Yeah, that's the language designed to limit thought.
Exactly, by reducing vocabulary and eliminating words that express dissent.
So you can't even think rebellious thoughts.
And that's what makes newspeak so insidious. It's not just censorship, it's about changing how people think.
So we've got surveillance, thought control, and newspeak, which is linguistic manipulation. What other key elements are worth talking about?
I think it's crucial to understand the concept of doublethink.
Oh, yeah.
The ability to hold two completely contradictory beliefs and accept both of them as true.
That's messed up. How can someone believe two opposite things at the same time?
It's not about logic. It's about submitting to the party's ideology, even when it contradicts your own experience or common sense.
So you surrender your ability to think critically.
You do.
That's what makes doublethink so dangerous. It lets the party control the narrative and stay in power even when what they're saying is false.
Yeah.
You see echoes of this in modern propaganda.
It's a reminder that we can't take our access to information for granted. We need to be critical thinkers, question what we hear, and seek out multiple perspectives.
One of the biggest lessons 1984 has to offer, it's not just a warning about totalitarian regimes. It's a warning about giving up our critical thinking and blindly accepting what those in power tell us.
And it's a reminder that truth matters.
Yeah.
Even when information is constantly being manipulated, we need to strive for accuracy, transparency, and accountability.
Absolutely. So we've talked about the world of 1984, fear and repression. What about Brave New World? A very different dystopia, one where people are happy, but maybe at a cost.
Huxley's vision is just as chilling, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
In Brave New World, control is maintained not through fear, but through pleasure. Citizens are conditioned from birth to be content with their predetermined roles.
Okay.
They have access to endless entertainment, drugs like soma, and casual sex is encouraged. On the surface, it looks like a utopia.
But there's something unsettling about it, right? Like it comes at the expense of something deeper, something more meaningful.
Absolutely. In Brave New World, individuality and critical thinking are seen as threats to stability. People are conditioned to value conformity and avoid emotional depth or intellectual curiosity.
So they're happy slaves.
Yes, content with their very superficial existence.
So Huxley is saying that control through pleasure can be just as effective, maybe more so, than through fear.
It's the disturbing brilliance of Brave New World. It makes you question what happiness even is.
Whether a life without pain or struggle or even the freedom to choose, is it really a life worth living?
It's a great question.
We've got two very different dystopian visions, but both are equally chilling. So how do they compare in terms of values? What are the differences in their approaches to control?
In 1984, the party controls every aspect of people's lives through fear, surveillance, and suppressing individual thought. Citizens of Oceania are bombarded with propaganda, forced to participate in these elaborate rituals, and live in fear of being denounced for even the smallest thing. It's a world of stark conformity.
But in Brave New World, the world state takes a different approach. Pleasure and distraction to keep people docile.
Yes.
They're genetically engineered and conditioned to accept their roles and to indulge in superficial pleasures, so they avoid deep thought or real connections.
That's a key difference between the two books. 1984 is enforced conformity. People are forced to obey. Brave New World is engineered happiness. People are conditioned to want what the world state wants them to want.
So Huxley is saying that control through pleasure can be even more effective than fear because it eliminates the need for force. People just accept their lot in life because they've been programmed to be happy with it.
That's exactly the point. It's suggesting that a society that controls us through our desires can be even more insidious than one that controls us through fear, because we've become complicit in our own enslavement.
It makes you think about how we're bombarded with ads, entertainment, and social media, all designed to keep us distracted and consuming.
Almost like we're being conditioned to crave the very things that keep us from truly engaging with the world around us. We're so busy chasing that next dopamine hit, we don't realize we're being manipulated.
Wow. So we've got these two contrasting dystopias, one based on fear and repression, the other on pleasure and distraction. How do those visions play out in the characters? How do the characters navigate these systems?
Well, in 1984, Winston Smith is a classic rebel. He's aware of the party's lies. He seeks out forbidden knowledge, has the affair with Julia, and he tries to join the resistance. He's driven by a desire for truth, freedom, and individual expression.
And Julie is interesting because she's not driven by ideology like Winston. She's rebelling just on a personal level. She just wants to experience things and be free from the party's control.
And those different motivations highlight how multifaceted resistance can be. For Winston, it's about the truth and fighting for a better world. For Julia, it's about claiming her own life and living it on her own terms, even in a repressive system.
And then there's O'Brien, the chilling representative of the party who manipulates Winston and breaks him in the end. He's a master of doublethink, able to justify anything, no matter how cruel. He embodies the totalitarian state.
O'Brien represents the seductive nature of power. He's intelligent and charismatic, and he truly believes in the party, even though it's built on lies. Shows how anyone can be corrupted by power.
Okay, so Winston and Julia fighting for freedom and individuality in this world of fear and repression, and O'Brien representing the party. What about the characters in Brave New World? How do they navigate that system of pleasure and distraction?
One of the most interesting characters in Brave New World is Bernard Marx. He feels alienated from the world state.
Even though he's conditioned to be happy.
Yes, he feels dissatisfied, and he's also physically different from the other alphas, which makes him question things.
Then you've got Lenina Crown, who's basically the perfect citizen of the world state. She's happy with her superficial existence.
Right.
And through those two characters, Huxley explores the tensions between individuality and conformity, the desire for meaning versus just mindless pleasure. Bernard wants more than just the shallow happiness that the world state offers, while Lenina is content.
Exactly.
So you've got contrasting characters in both novels, each representing different ways of responding to oppression, whether it's through rebellion, quiet resistance, or just blissful ignorance.
And by looking at those different responses, Orwell and Huxley force us to confront our own values. They make us think about how we would navigate those systems.
They're holding up a mirror to human nature. Would we conform, rebel, or find some middle ground?
It's a question with no easy answers, but a question worth thinking about because it gets to the core of what it means to be human, to make choices, even when those choices are limited by forces outside our control.
So we've explored 1984 and Brave New World, but how do these books, written so long ago, still hold relevance today? Have we learned anything from them, or are we just sleepwalking into our own dystopia?
That's a great question.
Let's explore that in the next part of our deep dive.
You know, it's interesting because even though 1984 and Brave New World are so different, they both tap into that fear we all have of losing control. You know, like control over our thoughts and our bodies and who we are.
It's true. And when you see stuff happening in the world today, like all this new technology and misinformation spreading online, it's a little creepy.
It is.
Like, are we really headed for some kind of dystopian future, or are we just being paranoid?
I don't think it's about being paranoid.
Okay.
It's more like being aware,
Yeah.
you know, of what could happen.
Yeah.
These novels teach us that dystopia isn't something that's way off in the future.
Right.
It could happen gradually without us even noticing, you know, we give up little bits of freedom for comfort and security.
Or even happiness.
Exactly.
It's like a slippery slope.
It is.
We start giving up a little privacy because it's convenient, and the next thing you know, we're living in a world where everything we do is tracked.
And it's not always about bad intentions. Sometimes these systems are put in place for good reasons, like to keep people safe or make life easier.
Okay.
But they could always be abused, and we need to be careful about protecting our freedoms, even when the threats seem small.
So let's say we're becoming more aware of this stuff.
Right.
What can we actually do about it?
Right.
These systems are so huge, it feels like we're just little pieces in a giant machine.
I think that's where these novels offer some hope.
Okay.
Because even in the darkest times, you know, when things seem impossible, there are always people who fight back.
Yeah.
Like Winston in 1984, offered in The Handmaid's Tale, even Montag in Fahrenheit 451. They all resist in their own way.
Okay.
They hold on to their individuality, and they imagine a better world.
So it's about individual acts of resistance.
It is.
Like little acts of defiance.
Exactly. Resistance can be so many things, you know.
Yeah.
It could be speaking out against injustice or challenging the status quo or even just choosing to disconnect from the systems trying to control you. It's about taking back your own life and making choices that you believe in, even when it's hard.
So we can't just expect the system to change.
Right.
We have to change ourselves, too.
We do?
Like, change how we think and how we act within the system.
I think one of the most powerful forms of resistance is just being aware. The more we understand these systems, the more we can see how they're trying to influence us, and then we can make our own choices about how we want to live.
That makes sense. But what about people who feel overwhelmed by all of this? Like, it's hard to know where to even start.
Just start small.
Yeah.
Pick one area of your life where you feel like you've given up too much control and start taking it back.
Okay.
Like maybe limit your social media or be more careful about the news you read or support groups that are fighting for what you believe in.
I like that. Start small and don't be afraid to shake things up a little.
Yeah.
It's like those ripples in a pond.
Exactly.
Small things can have a big impact.
They can.
You said earlier that these books offer hope, and I'm curious what you meant by that.
Well, I think just reading these stories and talking about them is a form of hope.
Okay.
By imagining these dystopias.
Yeah.
By thinking about the consequences of our choices, we're doing a thought experiment.
Right.
And maybe that helps us see a different path.
So the hope is in the conversation itself.
It is.
And challenging ourselves to think differently.
And I think there's hope in the characters, too, even the ones who don't succeed.
Okay.
Like Winston in 1984.
Yeah.
He might be crushed in the end, but his rebellion, his desire for freedom, his love for Julia, those things represent something powerful about the human spirit.
You're right. Even in really dark times, there's always that little spark of humanity that maybe can save us. Okay, so we've talked about all the warnings in these books, but what about their legacy? How have these novels influenced other dystopian fiction? And what can we learn from how modern authors are using these themes?
Well, both 1984 and Brave New World have had a huge impact.
Yeah, you see it everywhere, right?
Yeah, in books like The Hunger Games and Divergent, and movies like The Matrix.
Yeah.
And it's not just about copying the stories.
Right.
It's about taking those core anxieties, about control and freedom and what it means to be human, and finding new ways to explore them.
Okay, so what are some modern dystopian novels that you think are really interesting?
One that comes to mind is The Circle by Dave Eggers.
Oh, yeah.
It's a really chilling look at how technology and especially social media can be used to get rid of privacy and manipulate people. It's very much in the spirit of 1984, but it also feels very relevant to right now, with all our anxieties about the internet.
Right. It's like the telescreens are now our phones and our social media feeds.
Yeah.
We're constantly sharing our lives and all that data is being collected.
And The Circle takes that idea and shows how a company that seems friendly can slowly take control of people's lives.
All in the name of transparency and connection.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's a good example of a book inspired by 1984. What about Brave New World?
Oh, there are definitely books that explore those themes of pleasure and distraction.
Like what?
Like Ready Player One by Ernest Cline.
Okay.
It's set in a future where people escape reality by going into this virtual reality world called the Oasis. And it's all about entertainment and instant gratification.
It's like that soma they take in Brave New World.
It is, but with a modern twist.
Right.
And even though it's a more action-packed story, it still makes you think about those big questions of happiness and escapism and what happens when we lose ourselves in virtual worlds.
Makes you wonder if we're already becoming a society of pleasure seekers, always wanting more and more.
It's something to consider, especially with all these new technologies like VR and AR.
Yeah.
They could be good, but they could also become really addictive and isolating.
It's like in trying to avoid pain, we end up losing the things that actually make life worthwhile.
Right. The challenges, the struggles, the relationships.
Yeah.
Those things are what make us who we are.
And that's the message of so many modern dystopian novels. It's not just about warning us about specific things. It's about reminding us that human connection is important. And thinking for ourselves and having the courage to resist the things that try to control us.
Whether it's through fear or pleasure or something else.
So it's like these books are a wake-up call.
They are.
They're telling us to pay attention and be more engaged and fight for the things that matter to us. Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to keep reading these stories.
Yeah.
Keep talking about them.
Right.
And keep asking those tough questions about the world we're making and the future we're leaving for everyone else.
We've covered a lot in this deep dive.
Yeah.
We've talked about the themes of these classic novels and how they've influenced other books.
Yeah.
And how they're relevant to the world today.
But there's one big question we haven't really answered yet.
Hmm.
Which vision of dystopia is more relevant to us now?
Yeah.
Are we more likely to see the kind of fear and repression of 1984 or that seductive happiness of Brave New World?
That's a tough one.
It is. Let's explore that in the final part of our deep dive. Okay, so we've spent all this time talking about these two dystopias, the world of 1984, with all the fear and surveillance,
Yeah.
and then Brave New World, where everything seems happy, but it's all kind of fake.
Right.
But I keep thinking about which one feels more relevant to the world today.
It's a question people have been asking for a long time, and it gets even harder to answer as technology keeps changing.
Right, because we see bits of both of those dystopias happening right now.
We do. On one hand, you've got all this surveillance technology,
Mm-hmm.
the spread of misinformation,
Mm-hmm.
and people just seem to be getting more and more divided.
It's like Big Brother isn't just a character in a book anymore.
Yeah.
It's like it's everywhere, algorithms tracking everything we do online and our phones always knowing where we are.
And the scary part is we're kind of giving up our privacy willingly because it's just easier that way.
Yeah, or we think we need to be connected all the time.
Exactly.
But then at the same time, we're also obsessed with instant gratification, and we're always looking for the next thing to entertain us.
Right, and we rely on technology for everything, even for our relationships.
Like Huxley warned us about.
Yeah, like
It's like we're constantly being bombarded with stuff, social media and streaming services and online shopping.
it's designed to keep us hooked.
Yeah, and in the process, we're losing our ability to think critically or to really connect with other people.
And to just feel the full range of human emotions.
So it's not like we have to choose one dystopia or the other.
Right.
They're both happening at the same time.
It's a mixture of both.
And that's really scary because it's like we're being controlled and manipulated at the same time, and we might not even notice until it's too late.
That's why these books are so important.
Yeah.
They make us think about what's happening and be more critical of the choices we're making.
Because the future isn't set in stone.
It isn't.
We're creating it right now with every decision we make.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've said that both 1984 and Brave New World are relevant today. But do you think one is more dangerous than the other?
I think it's how they work together that's really dangerous.
Okay.
Because these different systems of control can actually make each other stronger.
How so?
Well, think about it. All that information and entertainment, it can distract us from what's really happening.
Mm-hmm.
Like, while we're busy watching videos, someone could be taking away our freedoms.
And the more distracted we are, the less we'll notice.
Exactly. And then when we're afraid of what might happen if we speak out,
Yeah.
we're less likely to do anything about it.
It's like we're trapped.
It can feel that way.
So what can we do?
We have to learn to think for ourselves, question everything we see and hear, and be aware of how our behavior is being influenced.
So awareness is the first step.
It is.
But what about taking action?
Well, even in those novels, the characters who fight back, they show us that we always have a choice.
Like Winston in 1984.
Yeah, and Offered in The Handmaid's Tale and Montag in Fahrenheit 451.
We all resisted in their own ways.
They did. And even though they might not have succeeded, they showed that even small acts of resistance can make a difference.
So what would those acts look like in our world?
It could be something as simple as spending less time on social media,
Okay.
or being careful about what news you read, or even having tough conversations with people who disagree with you.
So it's about being aware of how we're spending our time.
Yes, and the choices we're making.
Yeah. And reminding ourselves that we have the power to shape our own lives and the world around us.
And don't forget about collective action.
Okay.
Find other people who share your values and work together to create change.
Because we're stronger together.
We are, and remember that even small actions can make a difference when enough people do them.
It's like that ripple effect.
Exactly.
So as we finish up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought.
Okay.
The future isn't something that just happens to us.
Right.
We're creating it every day. And while those dystopian novels might seem scary, they also give us hope. They remind us that we have the power to choose a different path, to fight for what we believe in, and to build a better world.
A world that's more fair and just and sustainable.
Exactly. So keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep fighting for the future you want to see, because we all have a role to play in shaping what comes next.